coming up next, we have Crashtroid, who is here to tell us about preventing ear fatigue with roguelike music. Crashtroid is a self-taught composer for video games, located in BC, Canada. He works on Peglin, a Peggle-inspired roguelike. Adam, welcome to the celebration.
Thanks a ton, Chrissy. I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for the little intro. You just want me to. Oh, you're gone. Okay, I guess that means get going. So welcome everybody. My name's Adam. I go online as Crashtroid. That's the music name that I use everywhere. And I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about ear fatigue and how to prevent it when you're working with roguelikes. Roguelikes are generally a genre that you will play over and over, as I'm sure you already know. And when you go and play a game over and over, sometimes it's really easy to get exhausted with some of this stuff, whether it's like busting through walls of text in cutscenes or it's listening to a shop theme a million times over. So I just wanted to share with you some of the like anecdotal strategies that I've learned writing music to kind of do your best to prevent people from getting exhausted when they do replay your game over and over and over. Um, there we go. So yeah, I've been working on Peglin for the last little while. That's been like my big thing. I have done plenty of game jams, so I've worked on a lot of smaller projects. I've done a handful of other commercial releases. I have a wide variety of type of music that I compose in, but it's usually a kind of melodic, heavy, I don't know, I'd call it like a GameCube era kind of style. Very inspired by like David Wise, Josh Mansell, Danny Baranowski. Those are some of my favorites. Yeah, and because I'm self-taught, a lot of this stuff that I'm going to talk to you about right now is completely anecdotal and it's opinions. If you have any insight that works better for you, follow your gut. This is all me telling you how I would do things, and if you would do things differently, please do, right? Part of the reason that this industry is so varied and interesting is because everybody puts their own ideas into the ring. So there is going to be very little theory talk here, just as a forewarning. So what is ear fatigue? Basically, it's when someone has heard something so often or so much, or even at such a volume that different frequencies start to kind of blur into each other, and it makes it hard to distinguish different things. If you've ever written music and you've been trying to play a section over and over to hear what it sounds like and try to mix things properly or figure out what one specific sound is, you might end up getting ear fatigue because you've listened to that same portion over and over. Now all of a sudden you can't distinguish this snare from that snare, and all these other drums sound like they're melding together, and it's a little bit tiring. And because a roguelike is a game that somebody will play over and over, ear fatigue is liable to occur to them. And you don't really want that to happen, right? You'd like to keep your player engaged in your art as much as you can. So some of the strategies that I employed include things like unique segmentation, right? And a lot of these might feel obvious when you talk about them out loud, but then putting them into practice, I think, really makes a difference. When I say unique segmentation, I'm talking about having different chunks of the song so there's an identifiable progress in that loop of music that you've created, right? Some people might look at that as like the intro, verse, refrain, verse, chorus, whatever those other music theory words are. Some people might just look at that as like actually swapping songs halfway through to keep things varied, depending on if you got like a radio system in your game. But in essence, the reason that you're changing things up is to make sure that the player, upon hearing this loop, is feeling like there's progress being made rather than having it just meld into the background, right? So I have a little sample of some music here for you that I'm just going to allow to play. I chose the song Repentant from the original Binding of Isaac OST. And I think it has a very, very strong demonstration of the unique segmentation that I'm talking about, where there's going to be 4 different sections. I'll hold up my fingers as I play these sections, and you'll kind of identify where the song, where the song starts to shift in order to show you that progress, right? So the beginning will introduce all the instruments, then the second section will start to pull in some chords and start to get a little bit more spooky and more full of despair. Vocals are introduced eventually, and then my favorite part, the ending, is actually a section where piano is focused on and the song gets pulled into a major chord where it kind of feels more hopeful, like there is a chance for you to survive this game that you're playing. I'll stop talking, I'll just play it for you, and I'll hold up my fingers. This is section 1. So now you generally have an idea of exactly where those segments lie, now that I've been able to divide them for you. I'm gonna skip past this one a little bit here. Ooh. Um, the unique segmentation can also be found in Peglin, which is, where I've implemented it. And I won't play you the entire song because I realize how much time we have. Lightning talks are fast, but I do recommend that you go and take a listen to it later. See if you can discern the individual sections yourself. They're a little bit more subtle than the division in Repentant. So this is the Mines theme from Peglin. It's the main theme of the final stage of the game right now. And the different changes that I've made were changing things like the solo instrument that has the most amount of focus, changes in the drum line, things like that have all adjusted it. You can also use key changes or whatever it is that you want to distinguish those different sections. I'll just play you a chunk and then we'll move on real quick. So that ought to do it. I'll let you listen to that song on your own time and piece that one apart. The next thing I want to talk about is pacing your music to your gameplay. I think one of the things that people will immediately expect is that you pace your music to your aesthetic of your game. And I think that that's incredibly important. But of course, the main thing that your player is going to be doing with your game is playing it, right? The actions that they take every moment of their journey through your game are going to reflect in the way that they perceive the audio. And being able to play a prototype when you're developing music for games, I think, is incredibly helpful. Not always possible, but when it is, it's super helpful, right? You being able to understand as a composer how your game, like the game that you're writing for, actually feels and what the player is experiencing exactly, helps you write music that better fits the actual game. So a list of mechanics in the two games that I have listed here. RoboQuest, a arena shooter kind of roguelike game. Some of the mechanics involve rail grinding, bouncing off of enemies' heads like Goombas, weapon switching really quickly, kind of like, Doom games and Quake. And I'm trying to think of other examples, but Doom Eternal is the main one in my head. All of these are very fast-paced, kind of arena-focused mechanics where you're moving and attacking as fast as possible. And the game takes place in linear levels with some branching paths, but primarily they're big arenas full of pre-spawned enemies. So you walk in and there are things for you to fight. The music is then, of course, catered to this. Risk of Rain 2, which I'm sure plenty of people here are familiar with, the stages are massive, they're sprawling, and they take place on an alien planet, and you're more searching out enemies in the early game, looking for them to collect money, and then searching for loot, right? You're exploring quite a bit more than you are in RoboQuest. That sense of discovery of this foreign planet is very much emphasized in the way that the game plays. And so I've taken chunks of music from the both of them, although they are both shooter and combat roguelike games. You'll notice exactly how different the composers chose to make the music. So this one here is for RoboQuest. So I don't know if it was a coincidence or not, but playing that song and then actually playing the game, a lot of the actions you take, like the movement of bunny hopping, where you slide and then jump constantly to maintain your momentum, as well as a lot of the gun's fire rates, actually line up really well with the beats per minute of a lot of the songs in the game. So it kind of feels like you're almost playing in time with the music. I'll play the section from Risk of Rain 2 now. Perfect. I'm going to leave that one to you. Pacing your music to your gameplay is something you can think about. Whoop, we're trying to move past these. There we go. The final chunk that I want to talk about is transitions and flow. Being able to maintain a consistent like audio experience and not have the music kind of like jerk around or cut in and out really helps the player when they're doing multiple runs of a game over and over. Not having that like jarring transition between songs is actually really helpful to maintain that sense of flow, right? And when you have speedrunners, when you have people who are playing 3 hour long runs or what have you, you want them to maintain a bit of a flow state, right? You can do this with like alternate versions of tracks fading in and out. So like combat and ambient tracks are a great example that you can even see in games like Borderlands. They're present in plenty of video games. You can also do it with motifs. Like for Peglin, the map themes of each of the areas correspond almost directly to the actual stage themes. They share the same melody in a cut down and more passive version. And so that unification ends up helping that flow quite a bit. It makes the whole area feel more cohesive. I don't have time to show you the entirety of a Hades stage, which is a bummer because it's really fun to analyze, but I've made this like little flow chart here that shows you exactly how the music works, or at least how I've perceived it to work. I don't know the back end personally. So you start a stage with your ambient theme, you walk in, you start fighting enemies, and it phases into the combat version of that song where it's just more excitable. And then when you defeat all the enemies in a room, it goes back to ambient, and then everything, remains ambient until you move to the next room. At a certain point during that stage, you'll then reach a part where a stinger will play and conclude that song, and then there is no more ambient theme. It's just silence until you reach the next room in which a new song plays, right? It gives the player something fresh on the same floor to listen to. It also tells them they've reached about like the 33% mark of that floor, just audibly, right? They don't actually get a visual difference. So it's a quiet way of telling the player that they've been making progress. You still have the ambient and combat themes, and then you eventually get to a mini boss room where you have some unique music. Then the stinger plays again after you defeat the mini boss, and silence until you reach the third stage theme, which does the same thing as the last two. You reach the boss room, which does the same thing as the mini boss, a stinger, and then after that stinger, you are kind of in complete silence until you reach the next stage, right? Until you move on to the next floor. And so using a flowchart like this might help you visualize exactly how it's going to work for your music to all be lined up, and where you might have some gaps that might, take the player out of the experience a little bit. I highly encourage you to take a look at this and then go play Hades and see if you can like line up each of those themes. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, I just wanted to like reaffirm the 3 points here before this thing is over. Try to make your segmentation unique and have some variation. Try to pace the music to the gameplay and try to use transitions and control the flow. All of these pieces are going to help you keep your players more invested over long periods of time, which is exactly what you want for roguelike, I think. And also listen to the music yourself, just like outside of the game. If you can't listen to the song for more than 15 minutes at a time outside of the game, it probably won't work inside the game either. So just figuring out whether it's like a palatable song on a general basis is really important. That should about do it. So if you've got any questions, if we've got any time after this or in the breakout room, or if you want to reach out on any of the social media platforms, I'm happy to talk about this. I love talking about this. You can reach me through my website, crashtroid.card.co, or on Newgrounds, X, Bandcamp, Spotify, or you can go check out Peglin, or you can do all 5 of those things. I'm not in charge of you, but it'd be really cool if you did. Yeah, hopefully that helped out a little bit, and thanks for listening.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, as someone who does not know how to music at all, that was super easy to follow. It made a lot of sense. So thank you for sharing.